The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom is out, and I still remember when Jim Sterling tore the game to shreds because he had to learn a brand new way of fighting that he was not familiar with. Needless to say, his complaints for the most part fell on deaf ears at Nintendo. This time though, we have another contender throwing his hat in the ring in the midst of a major Zelda launch. And what is his gripe? Is it because this game is too much money? Is it because Nintendo released the game unfinished? Is it because AG Omona peed on every copy during the manufacturing process? No. None of those things. The problem this man has with the game is that the game runs at a low frame rate. Yes, apparently it's horrible for a game nowadays to run at 30 frames per second. Does this bother the normal consumer? Absolutely not. But he has a lot to say on Twitter, and most of what he says is just completely irrational. I feel he has enough of a following on Twitter to consider him an influencer, so I'm going to go over some of his tweets about his gripes with Tears of the Kingdom, and maybe we can see where he is coming from. 30 FPS games should be absolutely unacceptable in today's gaming market. For goodness sake, there are 3D mobile games that have higher frame rates than Tears of the Kingdom. Frame rates are a visual gimmick, like what these Nintendo cucks like to say. It's a gameplay issue. Wow. Where do I start with this? I guess I can start with, Nintendo does not care. They don't care about 30 frames per second, so long as the game is stable and enjoyable. They feel more obligated to make games for the Switch because the Switch still has a very thriving player base. It's like that argument, why are they still making sports games for last-gen consoles? It's simply because there are still audiences that buy sports games for those consoles. As for the 3D mobile games? Like what? What mobile game exists that's similar to Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? A game that's not cloud-based, an offline-only game that doesn't require a stable internet connection. So what smartphone game is like that? Odds are, they're much smaller games with fewer assets and is smaller in scale, and that's fine. Smartphone games can look impressive, but not without cutting corners like every video game needs to. Even Nintendo, they didn't release Mario Kart 8 for mobile. They released a simpler game, Mario Kart Tour, that's compatible with any phone. New phones, old phones, if it didn't work on older phones, they would be facing problems. Being able to make a simpler looking game is how these mobile developers make money because more people are able to play it. That's why Fortnite doesn't look like a next-gen masterpiece. Cost is another factor. You need a reasonable budget and a reasonable price point in order to see a profit in a mobile game. You can't just expect a console-quality game to be successful on a smartphone and price it at $60. If that were the case, all the AAA game devs would do it. Instead, you're seeing low-budget are either free to play or at dirt cheap prices. Because consumers don't look to smartphones in order to play Elden Ring, for example. As for low frame rates being a gameplay issue, it's not an issue, but it was rather a milestone Nintendo intentionally aimed for in order for the product to meet their standards. That decision wasn't up to you. But imagine if it were, this game would either be unstable and unplayable, or Nintendo would be losing money every year that it's not released games that, Tears of the Kingdom should have been 60 FPS, too. No excuses. Nintendo doesn't get a free pass from me, unlike the other cucks on this website. Would you prefer waiting until Nintendo made a new console just so that this game could perform as a faster frame rate? For all we know, Nintendo likely can't afford to wait years for a new console to come out just so that game performs better. Nintendo could be planning another new Zelda game for their next console, and the time you would prefer them to wait for that console to play this game. I don't get that thought process, that Zelda has to be 60 frames per second, or else they need to wait until the next console or whatever. We already had to wait more than 6 years for this one. 60 FPS helps facilitate better gameplay, it helps facilitate your experience. And you can only speak for yourself. You cannot tell others that they are getting a bad experience if they decide they want to play a game that runs on 30 frames per second. Just like in the mid-90s. The PS1 did not have great graphics, and it had long load times to boot. This guy would seem like the kind of person that would have complained about the long load times, despite that's what 100 million consumers at the time did not care for. But please tell me again how frame rate doesn't impact gameplay. I'm seeing a lot of negative dudes on here trying to cap for Nintendo's shit hardware. Holy shit. Is this guy for real? Of course frame rate goes down when there's more activity going on inside the game. It's impressive how Nintendo managed to do this with a handheld in 2017. His problem is that he wants to compare this, which released back in 2017, to next-generation PC and console technology. Of course it's not going to look like that, but they don't give a shit. It works that this game runs at just 30 frames per second. It works that they set the price to $70. It works that they haven't released an upgraded console in 6 years. They feel confident about this game, otherwise it wouldn't get released today. So all this flinging mud over a low frame rate falls on their deaf ears. At least the PS4 can play games that can run on an RTX 3070. What is the Switch's excuse? The Switch's excuse is that it's smaller and portable. This guy cannot be serious. Can he? He is serious? Wow. I would like to ask this buddy to open up his Switch and show us where the 8-core CPU is located. Of course the PS4 is all around more powerful. It's a dedicated home console. There's double the RAM capacity, and the Switch doesn't have an 8-core CPU. Do you seriously expect every PS4 game today to run flawlessly on a smartphone? This guy does not think things through. Yes. The Steam Deck completely destroys your argument, so don't even try it. And what games on Steam Deck run games as big as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom better than Switch does? He has not and will not give any examples outside of Genshin Impact. Yes, it's more powerful than the Switch. The specs suggest that it's a more impressive product. But you can look for yourself for comparison videos of how games perform on the deck compared to PC, and the deck is still rather limited and runs nearly similarly to the Switch. I don't even think this guy has a deck. If he did, I'm sure he could at least demonstrate how his claims are factual. Bruh, you're not going to damage control for Nintendo. Their hardware is dog shit and that's why they're missing out on a ton of new games. Well, Microsoft and Sony are missing out on fun first-party exclusives. They have to fight over third-party games like Call of Duty now by buying out AAA developers and publishers. All while Nintendo is still making money and not having to worry about that. Nintendo did have a choice of delaying the Switch and choosing the Tegra X2 instead of the X1, but that easily would have jacked up the price of the console. Don't give a fuck. Nintendo should have made better hardware that could at least hang with this Xbox One. This is hilarious considering Switch runs certain games better than the Xbox One. One notable game I own for both consoles is XCOM 2. It's excellent on the Switch. It runs well. The Xbox version can crash and lag when so much is going on screen, such as when you're playing a zombie mission. This ain't about graphics. This is about performance and longevity. People already paid $399 for a Switch OLED. I doubt they have much qualms paying $450 for a stronger system. OLED improves the colors on the screen. OLED is a new technology found in phones and TVs and such. It has nothing to do with the game's graphics or performance. Yes, but we can always strive for better. Don't settle for the bare minimum just because you're content. This ain't about flash visuals. This is about having the ability to get as many games as humanly possible on your platform so that your core audience won't be starved. This point makes no sense since more developers than ever before are now making software for a Nintendo console. Just because it doesn't have games from Rockstar or EA doesn't change the fact. And Nintendo did not strive for the bare minimum. They managed to release a high-powered portable system in March 2017. And it took Steam a good 6 years to respond with their own. And at that, you can remove the Switch controllers as well as hook it up to a TV. Sony did not do that. Microsoft didn't do that. Steam did it because they saw the opportunity after Nintendo gotten so much success with it. And that will only grow in time. Look at the mobile market and how that pretty much damn near made the dedicated handheld market irrelevant. What? How has the mobile market made the Switch irrelevant? Yes, there are 7 billion smartphones in the world today. But most consumers don't see them as dedicated game consoles. Nintendo made $14 billion last year. Gamers are constantly investing in Nintendo's hardware and software. You would not care so much about Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom and how many frames per second it ran on if it were so irrelevant. This is pretty much a self-contradiction. This ain't the 90s anymore. Nintendo is trying to be a toy manufacturer in an age where everybody has a fucking iPad. I'm not saying they can't retain that spirit, but Nintendo has to step into the 21st century and actually focus on refining their tech. This guy's argument is all over the place. He's complaining that Nintendo is stuck in the 90s while at the same time wants Nintendo to focus on straight-up power and performance like they were in the 90s. What do you want, buddy? The majority of gamers want this, but apparently to Nintendo fans, you're a hater if you just want to play your games like a grown adult. Well, 125 million people don't agree with this. And this statement here makes him sound like a hypocrite. This guy will call you a Nintendo cucker shill or simp if you just wanna play your games. Somebody play a game at 24 FPS and come back to tell this dude why he's full of it. As in playing a game, that's like a slideshow is any sort of fun? I really have to wonder if AG Aonuma really did piss on his copy of Zelda. Because 24 frames is the frame rate movies play in. Do you get this upset when watching a movie because it's not in that slapstick 60 frames? Maybe you should ask Disney why they didn't animate old classics like Cinderella in 60 frames per second. Or ask an anime studio to animate in 60 frames. You only have insignificant problems like this when you want to push some agenda. This argument is just as bad as all the bullshit excuses Melanie Mac made for why the Tomb Raider games were bad, even though she dedicated her whole channel to them. For the 100th time, this ain't about having the strongest console. It's about having a system that can run games adequately. There's a reason why Genshin Impact isn't on the Switch. Same reason why Hogwarts Legacy got delayed until the fall for its Switch release. So not only is this man not able to show he actually owns a Steam Deck, but he doesn't even give good examples of games, aside from a Breath of the Wild ripoff and a game that's too ambitious for a handheld console. He has yet to show any proof how Genshin looks nice on a smartphone. You can play at 60 frames, but they have to make sacrifices so the game is still stable and either doesn't crash or doesn't burn the phone's battery in 5 minutes. And as I said before, Genshin always requires an internet connection. Servers are what help the game look the way it does, and the caveat is that the game always needs money to keep those servers up. Only the Nintendo fanbase can adequately be happy with bullshit and mediocrity. This ain't about the mug graphics argument, dumbus. This is about having a system that can run your games without looking like a fucking PowerPoint slideshow and being able to get the latest games. We still have people arguing about this? If 30 is a PowerPoint slideshow, then what is 60? Because games can run faster than 60 if the hardware and other settings can allow it to. Suppose 120 frames was the norm. Then the argument would be that 60 frames isn't enough. It will never be enough for bad faith actors like this guy. This guy sounds like he is no use pleasing. Can you be chill with this? I wanna be able to download you without Nintendo hitting you with a C&D. Chill bruh. Well, retweeting them certainly doesn't help matters, does it? And this proves nothing. You're just proving how a high-powered PC has higher power over a handheld from 6 years ago. The Steam Deck is a handheld. Stop the cope. If the Steam Deck is a handheld, then certainly it's not going to guarantee the best specs like a PC. Simply having a Snapdragon chipset doesn't change the fact that you're still on a handheld with a limited capacity compared to that of a dedicated game console like the PS5. Hogwarts Legacy's Switch version got fucking delayed until the middle of fall. At that point, they might as well not have released it. Had the Switch attempted to bring some level of competency terms of software, we wouldn't be seeing droughts like this for the system. And so what? How many PS5 and Xbox Series games got delayed? Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League was supposed to release this month, but now it's been delayed almost a whole year. Where is Elder Scrolls 6? Where is Fable 4? Where is Perfect Dark? Are these games just too ambitious for the hardware they're being made for? You might as well just boycott consoles entirely. As for droughts? Dude, there are over 5,000 games on Switch. Nintendo has proven they don't need Hogwarts. They don't need Madden. They don't need Grand Theft Auto or the most recent Resident Evil. Because they have proven that they can be successful without all that. He says the Switch doesn't have games, but he also says that the PS5 doesn't have games. The guy just sounds like he has no idea what he's talking about or what he actually wants. Deja vu, right? And for kicks, let's just see how Hogwarts runs on Steam Deck. Low preset, 30 FPS. Lol. At least have the facts to back up your argument, dude. Sorry bud, but the Steam Deck completely destroys that argument. We even have a sus literally making their own deck competitor now. Nintendo fans advocating for mediocrity and complacency is why you're not getting many games on your system of choice, day and date. Steam Deck and the ROG Ally run computer games with interchangeable settings. It's a different process to make games for Switch since it needs to be refined for the console. It just can't automatically detect the best settings that games can run at. So you're pretty much asking Nintendo to make a computer. No thanks, they'll stick to consoles for now. Newsflash. Ain't nobody trying to be Nintendo. You're so busy projecting your wants and desires that you're actively alienating people who do want games like DMC5 to be on the Switch. Nintendo fans, stop being selfish. Challenge. Level impossible. It's actually you that's projecting your desires of having Zelda run at 60 frames per second. And let me say, any game can be ported on Switch. If the developers have the willingness to do it, it can happen. Devil May Cry 5 could be a Switch game. Capcom for some reason doesn't see it worthwhile. Street Fighter: The 30th Anniversary Collection released in 2018 for Switch, PS4, Xbox One and PC. They did a bonus where players could also get Street Fighter 4, but not for Switch owners. They couldn't bother to make a Street Fighter 4 Switch port. Ironic, considering there's a 3DS port. So it's not an argument whether or not it's possible, but rather do the developers have a reason to make it. The fact of the matter is that now is the time that Nintendo needs to focus on making competent hardware. It's Nintendo fans who are too blinded by the glory days to see the current reality. People have been saying this for around 20 years now. Their niche is handheld gaming. That is how they've garnered the most success in a market that they also have to share with two other gaming giants. I don't know what current reality there could be. Better than having no games at all. I understand this is an opinion, but it's pretty obvious why this tweet here isn't so popular compared to other ones. The issue is that the blue ocean strategy doesn't cut it in today's market. We have cell phones that can literally run mid-tier console games. Having weak hardware in a competitive market isn't going to get people on your platform outside your evangelists. None of these games you show have the size or scope of Tears of the Kingdom, like Shantae and Oceanhorn 2. These are not 3D adventure games with an open world in them. You said you know of games like this on mobile, but since these are the examples you actually show, I can't take you seriously. So your argument doesn't hold water, for lack of a better term. The fact that these are not huge games like Zelda is why the developers have had an easy time porting them to smartphones. So you're asking Nintendo to shoehorn some other bullshit gimmick that led to the Wii U being a disaster? Let me interject that Nintendo would not have the Switch without the Wii U. The Wii U was practically everything they wanted the Switch to be, like a Switch blueprint, but didn't have the technological advancements at the time to pull it off. They really wanted the Wii U gamepad to be a thing, but it didn't have the appeal it did because it was married to the console it came with. You couldn't take it portable, and you couldn't play with more than one gamepad. That was a discouraging thing. No, I'd rather them get the basics down than focus on another gimmick. Nintendo needs to go back to the days of the Super Nintendo and focus on practicality. And for the record, Nintendo could very well make just a traditional home console like Microsoft and Sony. If they did though, they would be considered second or third rate. It was easy for Nintendo to make the SNES when they had no competition. And that changed when Sony entered the market. But according to Nintendo fans, that's a bad thing. Nobody ever said the Steam Deck is a bad thing. Black Sage, however, is under the assumption that the Steam Deck is this miracle computer that can provide the best performance and every game will play on it flawlessly at 60 frames per second. It does not. It's nice to consider a portable console where you can play Steam games. But to think with smaller hardware that it's going to be just as capable as a high-end PC is crazy. The people at Nintendo aren't wizards. They're not going to come up with some quirky new way to play video games without severely damaging what they've salvaged in the core gamer. Nintendo does need to play it safe for a bit until they can afford to be innovative. So what are you talking about here? Playing it safe would be holding out on making a new console for as long as their 7-year-old Switch is still making bank. That's fine and all, but 60 FPS can only enhance gameplay, not detract from it. This is an opinion. But I have one too. 60 FPS makes games look sillier, like a sitcom. They also run at 60 FPS. I think they're okay for fighting games, Mario games, RPGs, not for anything that's trying to set a serious tone like Zelda or Destiny or whatever. If you're really trying to set a mood, making your game zippier is not the way to do it. So going back to his previous claim, no, 60 frames is not always considered an enhancement. And your game design doesn't mean anything if your game runs like a slideshow. Most movies and animes run at an even slower frame rate than Zelda does. Do you consider them to be slideshows? It's ironic how this guy seems to know much about anime but won't ask for any shows he watches to play at 60 frames. I don't know what it is with influencers like Maloney Mac and Black Sage. They might seem reasonable on the surface, but they go completely off the rails over the stupidest little drama queen things you could ever imagine. They do not act in good faith. They do not care about finding solutions, but rather perpetuate problems. All I can really say is watch out.